All right, hello everyone. So now we've gotten to the point where we're talking about abolition, and not only on our syllabus, but we've gotten to the point where we're talking about abolition as a serious and mainstream vision of what world we want to create in U.S. society in 2020, and how are we thinking about it in 2021, and moving forward from there, right? So, but abolition is not a new concept. Abolition is a term, as you've read from Andrew Dilts, as you've read from Marion Kaba, you've listened to those who espouse the term about abolition. It was inspired at a specific historical moment in the United States, and that was specifically on the abolition of slavery. And here's an image of our contemporary kind of contestation over maintaining systems that exist, the institutions built upon the constitutional grounding, on rights, on justice. And this one is, caught my attention because it's basically taking on this social Darwinist eugenics kind of approach to thinking about sacrificing the weak and reopen, right, in the name of neoliberal commerce. And that is precisely what abolition moves against. So abolition, and this is an image, some artwork by a colleague working with the Abolition Journal, and I thought it was very nice. Just wanted to share that with you. And if you're interested in looking at the Abolition Journal, there you can download lots of readings. There's a blog there, abolitionjournal.org. Go to it, and there's plenty of sources, and academics, activists are writing there. People who are behind bars are writing and thinking through how to create a new world. So the abolition of slavery is the moment that inspires the contemporary abolitionists who are seeking to build a different world, right? So we're thinking about social justice, and we hear a lot of conversations about defunding the police, divesting from resources, diverting budgets at cities. There are movements at college campuses, cops off campus, lots of social movements in our present. But first, we want to know what abolition is and why do some people fear it, right? So just as abolition, some people feared abolishing slavery. People had an economic interest, an economic imperative to maintain that system of domination. But even in that moment, the abolitionists, were moving. And here's a poster from 1849, an anti-slavery fair, right? Where people coming together to think about how to stand and do away with the system. So abolition means doing away with the existing systems of domination, not reforming them, right? So there's reform, people call maybe for training of the police, making prisons nicer, having policies that maybe are a little less about punishment, maybe about rehabilitation. But abolition says those systems cannot exist, right? So Andrew Dilts, in his Crisis, Critique, and Abolition, as I was just mentioned, this problem is not new. The moment we are living, and when he says here on page 230 that the crisis of this ism, if it appears new, this is less because if it is a radical break with U.S. traditions of domination and oppression, but more because we are seeing a return to an unapologetic and open form of white supremacy as a political system, right? So when we read through white supremacy as a political system, it is the entirety. It is all of the institutions, right? So not necessarily a return, and this is where I would add, this is a continuum, right? I mean, it's a return to that unapologetic form, but it is linked to those previous moments of when that system was entrenched. So this concept of abolition democracy that Dilts presents us with, when he makes this argument that we have theory and we have practice in order to lead us to a transformation of society, and people have been doing that work from W.E.B. Du Bois, the first African American to earn his PhD from Harvard University in the early 20th century. And the philosopher and activist Angela Davis, who is here still struggling to build that better world and do away with these systems of domination. So this mode, and the central argument is this mode of radical critique that is particularly suited to this moment is already available. We have that historical and critical analysis that builds upon these two thinkers and practiced on the ground. So we have the thinkers and we have those practitioners all under this umbrella of producing abolitionist politics. So abolition is not simply the way to think about and undoing maybe just the prison, but it is all these forms. And as you read here, you see how that comes together. And this is just a book, if anybody's interested. Sorry, The Abolition of White Democracy by the late political theorist Joel Olson, where here he's saying if you want to have, thinking about what Andrew Dilts is talking about, building from Du Bois and Angela Davis on that concept of abolition democracy, you need to abolish white democracy, because we exist in a democracy, but it is fundamentally racialized, right? So whiteness, and we must abolish that. And Joel Olson theorizes and thinks through how that is made real, manifesting itself. So the critique, necessary steps to what Andrew Dilts presents us with is first, abolitionist theory. He provides us an overview of the theory, and then secondly, linking it to that abolitionist practice, and then pointing us to this area where they come together. And it is through, he uses the model of critical resistance, which was born here in the Bay Area in Oakland, California, and is here and very active across, not only in the Bay in California, but across the country and globally, linking up with other global movements against mass incarceration. So abolition is itself a work of radical negation, and on the critique and of an immoderate and even fanatical saying no. It is the no against the current order that opens the ground for other ways of living and acting that do not rely on that current order's logics or demand. What does that look like? Well, it names an ongoing dialectical and fugitive project of mutual liberation. It escapes our grasp, yes, but it does so by pointing toward a democratically conceived horizon in which, as abolitionists frequently insist, no one is disposable. That last part, no one is disposable. We don't exist in that world. In the United States, some bodies are disposable. This is why we have this contestation with people making demands to their human worth and dignity. We are calling for an abolition of that society, this society, where maybe as people are practicing and thinking through and enacting new forms of democratic participation, that radical egalitarianism, maybe we will achieve, not maybe, but possibly, we will achieve that stage where nobody is disposable, no human is disposable, right? Where people will not be housed and put away behind bars, where children will not be in cages. That is what Andrew Dilts is telling us here. So now the action. And this is a question. What if the prison isn't broken at all? What if it is working exactly like it is supposed to be working? And that is fundamentally what abolitionists argue. That these systems, these institutions to house people who are outlaws, who have been cast outlaw, who have been criminalized, who have been the fugitives of society, were precisely the institution in order to dominate economically also, right? As we know that the prisons were born, and we see that expansion from that shift from chattel slavery to the rise of the convict lease system after slavery, to begin leasing out labor for exploitative purposes. We know through the 13th Amendment now that allows, that undid slavery, but allows for, except for the punishment of a crime. So that happens through the prison, where prison laborers, firefighters out here in California, who are brought out from the jails to fight these fires, right? For meager cents on the dollar. So, but what this quote that Dilts takes from, abolition defines both the end goals we seek and the way we do our work today. Abolition means a world where we do not use prisons, policing, and the larger system of the prison industrial complex as an answer to what our social, political, and economic problems. Abolition is not just an end goal, but a strategy today. So it is a constant practice. The world will not come about if we do not do the work, is what Andrew Dilts is saying. And if we were together in class, we would have this discussion. I wouldn't be saying what Andrew Dilts is saying. I would want to know what you are all, the way you're interpreting Andrew Dilts. Or abolition in general. You have the video, you have Miriam Kaba thinking about abolition. You have it out there in the streets. Some of you may be engaged in some of these projects. And this is critical resistance, and I've included some links here to the writings that Andrew Dilts pointed to in his articles. So I've linked them here for you. And they're already posted on the PowerPoint. And that's why I posted that separately for you. So you'll be able to just click on them and go straight to the documents. So critical resistance here, been doing work in Oakland since 1997. Chapters have expanded into these areas. And so their approach through all these forms of thinking and practice, so their approach, again, to prison abolition, gender justice, etc., organizing for that mutual liberatory practice, right? So abolition democracy now, right? So Andrew Dilts, at the end tells us it is time for us to recommit to a radical stance, to an immoderate negation of those unjust institutions whose presence feels so natural that to oppose them seems impossible. So Andrew Dilts is coming at us here from a point of where society is at today. Well, yes, we can agree that the police are doing some very bad things, unless you're a police, but maybe they just need training, right? He's saying you cannot take that position. That would just sustain the form of their police violence, right? Because that's the way this institution was born, how it's progressed, the culture, everything. So we need to take on the stance that would do away with those systems. And we need to take that on in order to demand change, right? Where we are seen, all of us, where no one is disposable. And this last quote, when he states that because abolitionist critiques demands that we directly confront and challenge white supremacy, heteropatriarchy, and contemporary fascism, it both acknowledges the ongoing crisis and is a bulwark against the crisis at hand. It is a transformation of the current world through the building of a new world. So these things do not happen overnight. It takes the constant effort, the thinking through, the strategizing, the meeting in the rooms, in the streets, in those institutions that are working against the majority of people and locking them up or policing them in the everyday, or women whose bodies are disposable, or our LGBT community who is targeted, or our undocumented populations who are caged at the border, right, for profits. So these systems come together, and what abolitionists demand and are working to is to say no more. So I hope you've enjoyed this. If it hasn't been an introduction into abolition, I know some of you may be engaged, as I mentioned, in some of these projects. And the theorizing is central. Andrew Dilts is a political theorist. And so he's constantly, and you can look him up, see some of his other writings as part of his, he's got a couple books out, thinking about the prison. And that's where I want to pause now and just shift from here. And again, just to thank folks for taking these readings seriously. And it's a survey course, and now we'll be moving on from here, right? But this is hopefully a brief introduction, and now hopefully you know more about abolition, and also the Abolition 101 video, which was pretty informative. Thank you.